Well, with that, I think I'm going to get started. My name's Mia Lewis. I'm with Common Cause Ohio. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a big group tonight. I think we're going to be at 200 in about 2 seconds. Um, we are very excited this evening to have former Justice Yvette McGee Brown, who has extremely graciously stepped in at the last minute as former Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor had an event that came up that she wasn't able to change, so we are very appreciative. We're going to have a conversation and a Q&A with Yvette McGee Brown, and then we're going to have a little bit of like, where are we at, and some additional questions that you all sent in. We're going to talk about what we've been up to. We're going to talk about volunteer appreciation, which is pretty much what we feel all day, every day over here at Fair Districts. We're going to talk about upcoming events, and we're going to wrap up. So thank you so much. Remember to put your questions in the Q&A. You will get a recording and slides tomorrow. And so, don't worry if you miss something. We are so excited to see all of you, and also some saying that they have signatures, which is really fun. Remember to put your questions in the Q&A. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Turcer.
Well, once again, welcome. We're just so pleased that you're here. And this is our April Huddle. And we are so blessed to have former Justice Yvette McGee Brown with us. We had a little bit of a surprise that former Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor is not able to participate. And I'm so glad that Yvette McGee Brown was able to step in. As you might imagine, she's an incredibly accomplished woman. And it's the kind of resume that makes you wonder what the heck you've been doing with your life. She is, someone who is a first in many different ways. She was the first African-American woman to serve on the Franklin County Common Pleas Court, and the first African-American woman to serve as a justice on the Ohio Supreme Court. She is now a partner at Jones Day, and I'm going to encourage Tiffany to throw in her bio. But things always are better when you hear directly from Yvette McGee Brown. So the next part, I'm going to start to ask her some questions. So welcome. We are incredibly pleased that you are here. And what I'm hoping is that you can tell us a little bit about yourself. We'd like to know, well, why do you care so much about gerrymandering? And how is it you ended up helping lead this campaign?
Well, one, let me just say on behalf of the Chief Justice, she does send her regrets, but she's pretty much the reason I'm involved in this campaign. In 2011, I wrote the dissent on Ohio's last redistricting effort. And the Chief Justice and Paul Pfeiffer joined my dissent. I was the only Democrat on the court, and I had a 4-3 dissent because as you look at the way the Article 11 in the Ohio Constitution, it was very clear how we were supposed to draw districts in this state. And so watching what went on last year, really, Maureen is one of my closest friends, and seeing all the arrows that she took just trying to create fairness in this state. I mean, I grew up with a grandmother who didn't get to vote until she was a middle-aged woman because she grew up in the Jim Crow South in Macon, Georgia. Voting and fairness is so important to everything I am and what I've spent my career fighting for. And if you think about it, there's almost 8 million voters in this state, and 76% of them are independent. And so when we gerrymander districts, what we're really saying to 2/3 of this state is you don't get to access your representatives. You don't get a vote. And that can't be what democracy is about. You're on mute, Catherine. I can't hear you.
2024, and I'm still on mute when I'm not supposed to. Okay, what do you consider kind of the single biggest problem that gerrymandering causes?
Well, what gerrymandering causes, it creates the divisiveness we see right now, right? So whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, what it does is allow politicians, one, to select their voters. So there's no longer the fight for ideals. My position is if you believe in your ideals, be willing to put them forward. And if people don't vote for them, then your ideals aren't good. But now what we have are people, they select their voters, and their voters become more extreme as they get to a smaller and smaller slice. So for the vast majority of people in this state, we have a legislature that doesn't reflect the majority of the people in Ohio. They reflect, whether Democrat or Republican, the extremes of both parties, because that's who the gerrymandered districts go to support.
So now when I think about, the big fight to do citizens, not politicians, I actually really love the name because the solution is in the name, citizens,
Right.
not politicians. One of the questions that we really got had to do with, well, what are some of the other states that have these kind of independent commissions? How long have they had them? And, how have they worked?
So I think that from what we've done in our research, and we spent a year, there was a group of us who spent a year really looking at other states. California has had a citizens redistricting effort since 2008. When Arnold Schwarzenegger was in Columbus for the Arnold Classic, he actually took time to do a town hall and talk about why he supports redistricting efforts, and he believes that you have to get politicians out of it. Michigan has had an independent, citizens-led redistricting effort since 2018, and Iowa has a nonpartisan redistricting process that has existed since the early 1980s. So we know it works. We know that if you can get politicians out of it, I mean, think about it. Who else gets to select their own job? Who else gets to say, these are the criteria for my job, so you have to hire me because I'm the only person that fits these criteria? So we know it works. We've looked at these other states, and Colorado also has an independent redistricting effort. So we're not going to be the first, and we've looked at those other states to figure out how to create an independent citizens commission that is the best in class.
Well, thank you. So this is the other question. One of the things that we did is we asked people to fill out a form and share some questions, and we got a bunch of questions. And this is one that we had a couple different times. It's along the lines of, it makes sense to create an independent citizens commission, but who are the people who are going to want to be map makers and decide, but they're not somehow politically connected? Do you think that people will want to be on the commission?
So the important thing is that people don't have to be map makers, right? There are computer programs. I mean, it's really, you touch a button. So what we have to do is make sure that there is numerical representation as the Constitution lays it out, and that we keep communities together, that we don't divide communities. There's an entire process that describes how you keep communities whole when you're drawing maps. So there are experts across the country. There are computer programs that do this. Yes, it will have to be people who are knowledgeable and care about democracy, but they don't have to be map drawers. And so we're going to select people. You can't be a politician. You can't be a lobbyist. You can't be a former politician. And you can't be somebody who's married or cohabitates with a politician or former politician. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this commission is selected by retired judges so that they are impartial, they have no axe in the fight, and these will be citizens who are willing to step forward because they want to serve their state. I think there are people who care about democracy.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people that care deeply about voting, and there are a lot of people that are on this webinar right now in this huddle who actually created community maps, who actually created
Yes.
district maps. I know I saw at least one of the winners of the redistricting competition that we did, so that and that it is the kind of thing where it's super hard to gerrymander. It's not so hard to actually create
Yes.
districts that keep community together.
Yes. And this is
So,
going to be the third time Ohioans have tried this. I mean, in the 1950s,
mhm.
they tried to lay out, This is how you draw maps. And every time they're thwarted because there are politicians that are drawing the maps.
Well, and it's the same kind of thing. I was thinking about this earlier about how judges step away and shouldn't hear the cases where they have a personal benefit. It's very similar to that.
Yes, absolutely.
So this was another one that folks have been thinking about and that we hear. And it's about last September when the Ohio Redistricting Commission, and so that's the elected members of the Ohio Redistricting Commission. So there's 7 of them, 5 Republicans, 2 Democrats, including Governor, Auditor, and Secretary of State. And what happened this past time, the 6th attempt at map making, is that they got together in back rooms and they created districts. And the question really is, well, does that show that it works? You know, in other cases, yes, in other cases, one political party drove the process. In this case, the people that were members of both political parties came together. What do you make of that map making?
So I think that, yes, both parties got into a room and they voted on maps. That doesn't make them constitutional. And if you look at the maps that were selected, the districts that were drawn, they slice through communities. The goal of any kind of legislative map should be to keep communities together so that people have an elected representative that represents that community. I can't tell you why. I have my ideas, but I won't say them here, as to why both parties got into a back room and, you know, adopted unconstitutional maps. But what I can tell you is that this state that I live in, the legislature that we have, does not represent the majority of Ohioans. Ohio is not an extremely conservative state, despite what you have reflected in the legislature now. And I think that we have to have a General Assembly that meets the will of the people and don't allow the fact that 2 Democrats agreed to go along with unconstitutional maps make you think that the maps are any more fair. And I would say this to both the leader of both houses if they were in front of me. I don't agree with what they did. I don't know why they did it. I don't know if they were worn out, but that process is not the process that we should have for a thriving democracy that wants to keep its young people in the state and have jobs and a good economy.
I know for myself, I was just horrified that everything was done in back rooms, because part of the amendment from 2015, because we're talking about state legislative map making, was about a more transparent process.
Right.
And, you know, that doesn't mean a sweetheart deals in back rooms. And I don't know if many of the folks that are on this call who paid lots of attention and were paying attention in September will know that they came, you know, late at night, and, you know, it was 10 o'clock when they passed the state legislative maps on a Tuesday, and then they reconvened on Friday to actually change a district because they had double bunked. In other words, they put 2 incumbents in the same districts. And I think that tells you everything, you know, everything we need to know, right, about incumbency protection and sweetheart deals.
Yes. Well, the governor himself said, you know, maybe we could have passed more constitutional maps. I mean, that's a very telling statement.
Oops, what did we do?
He said the quiet part out loud.
All right, so this is one of the things that so many of us have found incredibly frustrating. And it has to do with the fact that, you know, it just felt like Groundhog Day. You know, basically the Ohio Supreme Court would say, hey, this is unconstitutional, you need to get back to work. And then they would get a map that was nearly identical and it would all start again. And occasionally the maps were absolutely identical. Someone in the chat was mentioning the fact when they hired the bipartisan map makers and then just actually ignored them and said, oh, there's a deadline, we have to go forward. So many of us found that ongoing litigation map making process really hard to fathom. And so, you know, the question really is, how does the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment address impasses and litigation?
So for the most part, it takes the courts out of it, right? You have this independent commission, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 5 independents. And so their goal is to come up with the maps and the language. What happened in the last one is that there were words like should. You can't give the court should, right? You can't give any wiggle room. So what this process does is it tries as best as possible to take the court out of the process and keep the process solely with the commission. Because what the political parties tried to do, the Republicans in this case, was to run the clock out, right? They knew if they kept submitting maps and the maps were deemed unconstitutional because it takes time. You submit the maps and you got to go to court. All of that is running the clock out. And they know the longer it takes, at some point the court has to say, we've got to go with maps because we have to have an election. This process will remove that because you've got 15 people not interested in preserving their own jobs.
This is one of those things too, where I've appreciated the different really detailed things that are in the amendment, including, special masters that are appointed early in the process that are independent map makers, cartographers that are prepared to step in if somebody does file a challenge. I think that makes an enormous difference. That, how can I put it? That the proposal is very prescriptive. Can you tell us a little bit about how that process for creating the amendment in the first place? How did you decide, okay, well, we absolutely need to worry about this issue and that issue. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So it took over a year. So Maureen, the Chief Justice, said, I'm going to take a couple of months and just, do nothing. Literally, we had our first meeting in January. I mean, she retired in December, first meeting in January. So we had a bipartisan group of people that included, League of Women Voters, as well as Republicans and Democrats, from all different professions, sit around the table, and we studied other states. And so when we looked at those other states, and we all spent a lot of time talking about what was going on, what had happened the year before. And that's how we tried to come up with an amendment that would remove the possibility for those shenanigans, right? We thought about everything that had happened in 2023, and we said we have to come up with a process that can remove some of those political partisan gymnastics. And don't get me wrong, both parties have abused the system. And so the only way to make sure it doesn't happen is to take out the squishy words like should as much as practical. You've got to remove those words and say shall. We shall do this, this, and this. And so it wasn't easy. And we met a lot over a year to come up with this proposal. And again, looked at other states, consulted lawyers, consulted districting experts to come up with this constitutional amendment.
Well, we are in the process of collecting a ton of signatures. And as you might imagine, many of us that are on this, huddle, we have been at collecting signatures since December, when it was cold and miserable, when we were running into people who wanted to see Santa Claus and spend time with their friends. And then January wasn't great. And so we've been at it a while, and we need a little inspiration. Do you have any words of advice as we work our way to the deadline, which is July 3rd?
First of all, thank you. I want to say thank you to everyone on this call. People don't understand. I'm going to quote Stacey Abrams because she's one of my heroes. That we have a Secretary of State who has systematically tried to remove people from the rolls. And Stacey Abrams talks about the importance of voting. She said, you know what? We don't lose our Second Amendment right if we don't shoot a gun for 2 years. We shouldn't lose our right to vote if we don't vote for 2 years. So the fact that all of you, hundreds of you across the state, are standing up for people who sometimes feel voiceless, going out in the cold, in the rain, asking strangers, going up to them, asking them to sign petitions while they look at you crazy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There are never enough thank yous to acknowledge what you're doing in inclement weather, when you could be spending time with your families. You are the secret force because you're keeping the Speaker of the House up at night. You're keeping the Senate President up at night because they know there is more power in we. And so I want you to know that even though I can't shake each of your hands or call each of you by name, what you are doing is so important to this state and how we move forward. The collective we, that old saying that the only way that evil triumphs is for good people to be silent. You are not being silent. Every day you're using your voice. And I just want you to know from the bottom of my heart how much we appreciate you. And at some point, we're going to celebrate all together because of what you're doing in getting these signatures. Because once we're on the ballot, we're going to win.
Well, it is hard to take on power, but we're taking the power so that we, the people, have it. Do you have any final words? Because I know that you need to leave us for your next engagement.
What I would say to you is this. The people of this state, 11.5 million people in this state, they need us to fight. And we're not the first citizens in history to stand up against injustice. So I just want to leave you with this. Keep thinking about the future we want to have. As Gandhi used to say, we have to be the change we want to see, and know that we'll keep working if you keep working. No one person can do it, but together we can all do it. I thank you so much for what you're doing. This is just the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. Go forth, be great, and know that we're going to be right there with you.
Well, a great big thank you. I don't know if you've noticed in the chat all the people that are saying thank you, and we have a brava. So I just wanted to highlight, how much we appreciate your time and your energy. And once again, we know you need to go. So please just know that we appreciated your pinch hitting today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Keep up the good work. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thank you much. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is talk with Colin Marozzi. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Colin was actually an intern of mine a while ago. I don't know how many years ago that was. This is Colin from ACLU, Ohio. And so I'm just going to ask him a few questions. First of all, Colin, how did you start to become interested in gerrymandering?
Well, first of all, thank you. And good evening, everybody. It's always great to be here with you. I think what really first interested me in gerrymandering was when I did intern for you back in 2016, the spring of 2016 it was. I was in graduate school at the time, and I came down, and Common Cause was advocating very hard against our previous, decades gerrymandered map that really I think that map put the phrase of gerrymandering and the problems it creates for our government at the forefront of people's minds. I think that was, kind of the tipping point that people saw that it's just not right. It's not fair. And it has really poor outcomes. This was before Rucho v. Common Cause, the infamous Supreme Court case that said, partisan gerrymandering is a state issue. It's not a federal issue. So that really, got me, in the mindset of, well, we really need to do something to stop this. Actually, also, in addition, I worked in the state legislature when our current process was being debated and formulated, and I admit I drank the Kool-Aid. I thought that was what we needed, was a bipartisan agreement in the legislature, with buy-in from all those folks. Sadly, I was wrong, and I think a lot of people were wrong. It was hard to swallow, especially when you're in those meetings and you're hearing legislators talk about how, oh, this will be different and we're going to work together, and that just wasn't the case at all. So I actually would say, Catherine, thanks to you, redistricting has actually been one of my passions in my career. So.
Well, it was incredibly painful, wasn't it? That in fact, it didn't make a difference that we put good rules in the Ohio Constitution. It didn't matter what the Ohio Supreme Court said. It's very clear, I hate to say that these folks can't be trusted and we need to take the map making away from them. So this is one of the kind of questions that we really got had to do with like the approval process for maps. So, this was a question like, can you actually describe the approval process? Like, how is it that people on the commission approve a map? And can you explain what happens if there's an impasse? In other words, if they find they actually can't do a vote, what we would think of as a traditional majority vote.
Yeah, sure. And I would say, so to approve or adopt a map, it's a very simple process. First of all, there would need to be obviously a map introduced as, kind of the working document of the commission. That would require, a minimum number of public hearings, with notice of those hearings given far enough in advance that Ohioans would be able to come in and meaningfully participate. And those subsequent meetings and would need to happen if there are any alterations or amendments to the map. But for when the commission actually goes to kind of pull the trigger and vote on the map, it's really pretty simple. It requires 9 votes of the 15 members of the commission, and that includes 2 members from each pool. So 2 Republicans, 2 independents, and 2 Democrats will need to vote for any map that will be adopted by the commission. Again, this is really one of those things where I think we as Ohioans are a little jaded, and for good reason. During the previous redistricting cycle, we saw the turmoil and the chaos and the confusion that happens. But when we look at other commissions in other states that have this sort of multi-party membership, reaching a slightly above a majority vote, but with requirements that all political party pools have buy-in. That process works. Citizens, regular people are willing to make compromises and are willing to work in good faith and genuinely come up with an agreement. And they're not worried about their political or professional future after their service on this commission. So the likelihood of meeting the impasse or needing the impasse procedure is significantly lower on commissions that have citizen membership rather than politicians or paid political operatives as their membership. However, should Ohio, need to meet this impasse procedure, it's a very simple process, or a very simple concept, and one that has finality, which I think is critical in what we saw in the previous redistricting cycle about that it just never seems to end. Under the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment, there's not able to be a majority, consensus for a traditional map, the impasse procedure is essentially ranked choice voting. There's a runoff method. So every commissioner would be able to select their preferred map. They could be 15 different maps. It could be, 4 different maps if multiple commissioners are submitting the same map. So basically, the commissioners each submit one of their preferred maps, so 15 maps up for consideration. Then the commission, as a whole or individually, rank those maps in order of their preference. Their number 1 preference map at the top, all the way down to their least preferred map at the bottom. If a majority of the commission were to choose the same map as, the same map as their preferred map, that's final. That map is adopted and that map is implemented. However, if there's not a majority of commission members, you have the ranked choice voting runoff where the least liked map is eliminated. And then you have another round, and then the least liked map in that round is eliminated, all the way up until you reach that final singular map. And then once that final map is approved by a majority of the commission, that's your adopted map. So there is no way for a map or for the commission to not choose a map. kind of like how we had in the previous rounds. There is a forced choice at the end of this process. And the one thing we know about ranked choice voting and how that voting method works is it promotes, I would say, reasonableness. It promotes compromise. It promotes a moderate approach because, there's, not to get too technical, but there's game theory involved here. You can't put forward the most extreme partisan map because that map will get dismissed out of hand. It'll get eliminated by the other, the other two members or partisan pools. So it has a moderating effect on the maps that are proposed and we believe ultimately adopted by the commission. But again, it's very important to recognize that by having citizens on the commission and not politicians and elected and appointed, career party operatives, having that impasse procedure or having to use that impasse procedure, far less likely. And we've seen that in other states as well.
And then the question is, let's say, a map is, I'm a citizen, I'm unhappy with a map, and I file a lawsuit. How does that process work?
Sure. So under the amendment, any citizen, any Ohio elector can file a lawsuit against any given map. Multiple people can file lawsuits. However, all lawsuits will be consolidated into a single case. And the only body that can be sued or that can be sued in this is the commission in its official capacity. So essentially what happens once a map is passed and adopted, whether through the impasse procedure or through the regular procedure, is that there's a report that the commission will generate, including all the testimony that was given to the commission, all proposed maps, all amendments, and that report is what will constitute the record before the commission. And that record before the commission will be the benchmark that the Ohio Supreme Court will use to determine whether or not any map was unconstitutionally gerrymandered. So say an instance where, we're talking about creating districts in Cuyahoga County and a very strong litany of testimony comes in saying, we want districts a certain amount or X, way, a certain way. But then the commission turns around and draws districts in Cuyahoga County completely different from what the record shows. Well, that would probably be a strong case for, review and for scrutiny for the court. Now, say the court does hold that based off the record before it and the record in front of the commission, that some districts have been deemed to be illegally gerrymandered. Well, what happens next is that the court will then return the commission to work and say you have X amount of days to fix these issues. And if the commission doesn't, if they fail to make that remedy, then they are no longer part of the process. Then, resolving those problematic districts, that responsibility falls to two special masters or court-appointed professional map drawers, just like how we had the Johnson-McDonald experiment this last go-around, those types of people. Professional map makers, professional district drawers will come in and they will tinker with the districts as minimally as possible to meet compliance. And then once the special masters have done that tinkering, the Supreme Court will view the map. If they sign off on it, that map will become adopted. So again, there is no opportunity for this back and forth. The Supreme Court tells the commission to fix the map. The commission does nothing. The Supreme Court doesn't really have any way to resolve that or to force them to do it. If the commission misses their one opportunity to get it right and to fix the districts, if they can't get it done, then they're out of the process and it goes to the special masters who will then create the districts, again, as minimally as possible. And then that's your final map.
I have to say, this might be my favorite part of the amendment. And a lot of times we talk about kind of the importance of the Citizens Commission and citizens doing it. The one question that we got kind of repeatedly had to do with, are there ways that the political parties could play games or could manipulate the process? And what are the safeguards that are in the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment?
Sure, sure. And, first I do want to, do a little level setting here. There is no way that we can stop political parties and politicians from attempting to manipulate the system. What I think everybody here is really proud of, and one of the things we like most about this amendment, is how carefully and thoughtfully the amendment was constructed to actually keep them from being able to. It's one thing to try, it's another thing to do. And I think that there are enough safeguards, enough guardrails in the amendment that keeps them, party bosses, politicians, lobbyists, from actually having an impact on this process. And I'll give three reasons why. First and foremost, again, it's in the name. It's citizens, not politicians, drawing the map. That is by far the number one way to limit the influence, and I would argue to eliminate the influence of politicians and party officials and lobbyists from this process. You just take them out. You just exclude them. They've been proven that they can't be trusted to draw fair districts. We know that. So we're just going to remove them from the process wholesale. And that right there solves 95% of your problems because they don't have a role. They're a spectator in this situation. Now, there are a couple, other instances where the amendment, again, carefully crafted to actually use the political ambition and the desire to gain advantage by our partisan, officials to the citizens in charge of this commission, to our advantage, namely in the creation and the selection of the bipartisan screening panel of retired judges. I know I've talked about this on previous calls, but just as a reminder, the bipartisan screening panel is a 4-person panel of bipartisan retired judges, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. This panel is responsible for creating the 45-person pool that the 15-member commission will ultimately be selected from. So obviously the question is begged, who selects the selectors? And how do we make sure that the bipartisan screening panel operates with the level of integrity that we all expect? And I think this is where the amendment is really creative, really thoughtful, because so obviously there needs to be an application process for these retired judges. They would have to disclose whether or not they've had conversations with ineligible persons for the commission, so politicians, party officials, lobbyists. And if they do, then they're not selected for the panel. Simple concept. We also need to remember that retired judges are still bound to faithfully uphold and execute the Constitution. And these requirements for impartiality and for fairness are baked into the Constitution. And if it's found out that one of these, judges fails to meet that obligation, they are able to suffer professional consequences. They could go before the Ohio Board of Professional Conduct. They could potentially lose their law license if they act in a way that is, in violation of the Constitution, and it warrants that sort of discipline. But what I love the most is that when the applicants for the bipartisan screening panel are met, there's going to be a pool of 8 Republican judges and 8 Democratic judges. And from there, or I guess I should say, let me back up. When the bipartisan screening panel applications come in, the 4 legislative appointees of the Ohio Ballot Board, so we have 2 Democrats and 2 Republican legislative appointees to the ballot board, those 2 parties will choose 8 retired judges to serve as their selection pool. And then the opposite party from the ballot board actually chooses the judges who will serve on the panel. So we have Republicans choosing the Democratic judges and Democrats choosing the Republican judges. And you bet your bottom dollar they are going to expend every resource. They're going to tap into their networks to figure out, are these judges, are they able to operate with integrity? Are they able to operate faithfully and truly to the Constitution? Are they able to, put aside any sort of preconceived notions? And they're going to call their local party chairs who know these judges, who have, spent a career getting to know these judges, and they know how they operate. If they call a county party chair and that party chair says, oh, no, we've had issues with that judge, we want to stay away from that person. Well, guess what? Those legislative appointees to the ballot board aren't going to choose that judge to serve on the screening panel. So we're using their ability to kind of dig into their opponents, their partisan opponents, to our advantage. And I think that is very creative. I think that is one of the things that really insulates the commission from this partisan influence. Because again, the Democrats who choose the Republican judges aren't going to let, some wolf in sheep's clothing onto the screening panel. And same thing for the Republicans choosing the Democratic judges.
Well, I appreciate that. I was going to say, Bruce was saying, the concept is simple, but the safeguards become fairly complex. I did want to highlight that we are open to all sorts of questions when we do the next huddle in May. We'll be sure to be, provide you as many answers as possible, and we'll be following up with emails and that kind of thing. Colin, any final things before I hand it off to Elisabeth to begin the celebration? We are celebrating volunteers.
Well, if I could, I'll just take a couple of minutes. And I want to, we get a lot of questions a lot of times about what other states are pursuing these kind of commissions, what they look like, what are the lessons learned from those. And I've got to say, again, I think the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment really puts Ohioans in a position to succeed based off what we've seen in other states. And, we're now at a point where enough states have kind of started to work with these commissions that we see what works and what doesn't work. And I think the biggest thing we all need to understand is that all redistricting commissions are not equal. It really depends on how you set it up, and you have to set it up in the right way. And there's three main things that we have found when looking at political commissions versus truly citizen-led commissions. Number one, commissions cannot have only Democrats and Republicans on it, even if it's an even number. You need to have that independent voice in this process to keep it from breaking down into partisan gridlock.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at states like New York, when you look at states like Virginia, who have that equal number of Democrats and Republicans, but no independent or unaffiliated voices, those commissions break down and they're unable to pass anything. The second thing we have seen is that any commission has to be able to implement their own map. So they can't just provide like a proposed map or a recommended map that ultimately the authority for implementing lies with, say, the state legislature. These commissions have to be able to implement their own map. We look at states like Utah and Maryland that have kind of these advisory commissions. They just didn't work. In Utah, that commission created a seat wholly containing Salt Lake City, the largest population center, the economic engine of that state. Well, that would have created a Democratic seat in Utah. The commission saw that, thought it was fair for the people of Utah. They sent it to the state legislature. Legislature threw it out, cracked Salt Lake City across the 4 districts in Utah. And now the city of Salt Lake resides in 4 different congressional districts. You look at Maryland, their advisory commission developed a map that was 5-2, Democrat to Republican. The first time a Maryland map had more than 1 Republican seat in 2 decades. They send that map to the legislature. Legislature throws it out. We now have a 6-1 Democrat to Republican map in Maryland. And last but not least, we know for a fact that elected politicians on commissions ruin it from the start. And we see that in states, again, like Ohio, where they are just unable to get out of their own way and they intentionally bog down the system. When we look at other states that have partisan membership, we're looking at states, again, like New York. We're looking at states that, do not remove that self-interest from politicians choosing their own voters, self-interest that we know we just cannot be, that politicians cannot be trusted to navigate and put aside and do what's best for the people of Ohio. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'll turn it over to Elisabeth.
And thank you, Colin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Let's see if I can do all the things here. That was amazing. Everybody who just talked, I hope we all feel smarter. I know I do. We just wanted to take a minute to really just say thank you to everybody for all that you're doing, no matter what you're doing. These kind of beautiful pictures here are just a small fraction of what has gone on across Ohio just in the last couple of weeks, from collecting signatures at libraries and events, and probably every parking lot at some point or another throughout the state of Ohio. Volunteers have coordinated signature signing events for the primary that we just had, for Eclipse Day. And many of our volunteers were even out on Eclipse Day themselves collecting signatures. Fair Districts is powered by extremely passionate volunteers who are dedicated to ending gerrymandering in Ohio and also keeping the leadership of the General Assembly awake at night. And so that is why we are taking advantage of April's Volunteer Appreciation Month to, that wasn't supposed to happen, to ask people to nominate volunteers that they think are just doing an incredible job. This is somebody who is doing work that motivates you, or that has ideas that you think that just everybody should know about, or are expanding the campaign's reach in ways that otherwise people might not have heard about the campaign. And so if you know someone like that, please think about nominating them, and all nominees will be eligible to win a special raffle that will have some very sweet Fair District swag involved. And a few of these folks will even be featured in our social media campaign. We'll put the nomination link in the chat in a moment. And on that note, I'm going to hand things over to Trevor, who is going to talk about some of the very amazing and impressive things that the Fair Districts team, including the volunteers, have achieved. So you take it away, Trevor. Thanks.
Thank you, Elisabeth. Sorry about that. I was just answering some questions in the chat there, or in the Q&A. We are doing fantastic, and I know a lot of folks are asking about numbers and where we are, about signature collection, where we are in counties. But I just want everyone to know, first off, that we do not want to give a roadmap to the opposition. All right. Like, once they start knowing which counties are closed or close to being closed, that's where they direct money and resources, and opposition, like, the no sign campaigns and all that. So we don't want to show our hand, but I'm telling you, we are doing fantastic, and we are, reaching numbers on counties. We're on schedule. Everything's doing great, and we have more than 2,500 volunteers out there on the ground collecting signatures. We've trained more than 2,000 folks through our online trainings. We have petitions running in and out of 7 regional hubs, the 3 Cs: Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, Akron, Dayton, and Youngstown. Lots of great teams together, all kinds of circulation trainings, a bunch more coming up. We'll show those to you soon. And we've got all kinds of materials and resources available. And we're doing trainings all the time. Someone asked about finding those. If you're in our Slack, there's a folder in there, or please just get a hold of your area lead. They can direct you to all that good stuff. And we do have weekly leaders meetings on Thursdays where we coordinate with folks across the state, and we are doing fantastic work. All right, next slide there. As well as resources, we have all kinds of cool swag that we've got made up for folks. We made a bunch of signs. You've seen them out there at drive-throughs and signature events. We've got over 1,000 shirts that Mia has so graciously been able to get printed out for us, and beanies, cool beanie. I'm wearing one now. Ben Gerrymandering, very well made. Love them. Stickers, all kinds of stickers and buttons. Order their own, and we will share that with you as well. So all kinds of cool stuff to show your pride and your commitment to fair maps. Alrighty, next slide. And then mobilize. It took us a while to get mobilized up, but it is up and it is going strong. We've got hundreds of events up there. You could just go to mobilize.us or /citizens not politicians, and you could put in your zip code or your city, your county, and it'll show you everything. You could do like a little radius, show you everything within like 20, 50 miles. All kinds of events going up, signature collections, and all the wonderful places that we have volunteers out and about. And so please share that around. Folks are asking, where can I sign? Where can I sign? Direct them to the mobilize.us/citizens.politicians, and they can find somewhere close by them that they can sign a petition. And then next slide. Yes, and please volunteer if you're not already volunteering. We have, and we need signature collection. We're still collecting. Doesn't matter how where we've closed out. We are still collecting everywhere because we have to hit that 10% statewide goal, and so every signature counts. We want them from everywhere. So sign up, please volunteer at that link. There's our trainings up there. We have some upcoming trainings, and if you're unable to make those, we will work with you. Like, you could just watch one of the past trainings and do a little quiz, and we will get you up and running, and get a local lead out to contact you and get you set with anything you need, get you booklets. So get them booklets and get out there and get busy. We love you all. We appreciate you all. Thank you so much. You're doing a fantastic job, and we are going to rock this. We're going to have fair maps come this time next year.
Well, thank you, Trevor. Any final words?
Oh, well, maybe not this time. We'll be on the process. We'll have fair maps by September of next year. How about that? we'll be like looking forward to those beautiful maps that will be introduced by a citizens commission in the fall. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
Well, I always think it's so important that we have a shared vision of the future and that we're doing this together. And I just wanted to say once again, a big thank you to you all. I wanted to let you know that we will be sending you a follow-up that will have the slides and a recording. And it also will have some links to, all of the information that we shared. I also wanted to highlight that you should join us in May. So the next training is always the second Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. The next huddle is May 8th, and we are going to be joined by Mike Curtin. Now, some of you will be familiar with him because he's a former state rep in Columbus, Some of you might be familiar with him because he was the editor of the Dispatch for years, kind of a veteran newsman. Some of you might remember him because he is the author of the Ohio Politics Almanac, and he has done some wonderful, op-eds, kind of opinion pieces that draws in on Ohio history. And so he is going to come and talk with us about Ohio's history and our history of reform. And I'm just really pleased and hope that you can join us for the huddle on May 8th. And at the end of the day, I want, as we come to the end of this day, I just wanted to encourage all of us to have our eye on the prize. We're going to get those signatures by July 3rd. We're going to get on the ballot, and then we're going to win. And in 2025, we are going to actually work with the process, meaning, once again, go to hearings, share our community maps. And in 2025, we will have new maps for election 2026. And I wanted to say a big thank you. I know we didn't get to all of your questions, but we will do our best to get to them next time. And with that, I wanted to say thank you to you all. Thank you. Clearly, Yvette McGee Brown has left us, but wasn't she wonderful? And a big thank you to Elisabeth, a big thank you to Colin, a big thank you to Trevor. And with that, I'm going to send you all off. And I can't wait to see you at the next huddle, once again, May 8th. And thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Keep in touch. Bye, everybody.
Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.